Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. Today, I'm so pleased to be able to have Coach Gene Mattingly join us. Coach, appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I said coach, but you've got a day job as well.
Well, yeah, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me. Yeah, I do have a day job. I'm a financial advisor at German American as for my career choice, and then after about 4:30 in the market close, then I get to put my coach hat on.
Yeah, so now I understand. Just for full transparency, Coach Mattingly and I guess first time we were introduced was during our men's weekly Bible study, roughly about a year ago from the point when we're recording this. And one day I made the mistake of referencing Coach Mattingly as a banker, and he quickly turned on me and that set the record straight. Now I know it's financial advisor,
There
and
you
there is
go.
a difference, right?
There is a difference. And I have to make sure from a compliance standpoint that I always separate that because I do work inside of the bank. So my company is owned by the bank holding company. So there's some compliance reasons why I can't really say I'm a banker. I have to work more hours than they do most times. So
Well, I promise and commit to never use that term again in referencing Gene Mattingly. How's
I
that?
appreciate that. No, it's fine. It's fine.
One of the reasons I invited Coach Mattingly on, he is an impressive individual, a fantastic leader that is well thought of and well thought out in how he approaches not only coaching, but his personal life and his professional life. I came to quickly gain a high level of respect for the character, the integrity, and the communication skills that Coach Mattingly has when it comes to the value of leadership. And Coach, we talked just briefly, and I want to give you a chance to introduce more about yourself here in just a moment. But the whole intent of Leadership Synergized is really just to take a moment to pay it forward. And one of the things I think that gets missed in today's world and society is just that opportunity to understand that body of work and to look out ahead for those individuals such as yourself that maybe have 5, 10, 15, 20 more years of experience than someone who's watching this or listening to this might have in their career and to offer that insight. So I appreciate you again on behalf of all of our viewers and listeners. And from the bottom of my heart, I mean it when I say I think you've got great leadership qualities and you're a proven success in that regard. But tell the audience a bit more about who Gene Mattingly is and what he does.
Oh man, that's great opportunity. We don't get often to just kind of start from scratch. But yeah, first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's probably the core of my identity from that perspective. Professionally, I've been a financial advisor for almost 28 years now. I've been a quasi coach, baseball perspective for the last probably 23 of those years. I'm fortunate enough to coach at the high school level as a varsity head coach, and, and and get to coach with some of my best friends and some of the people that may have impacted my life over the last 25 years in a positive way. But first and foremost, Christ follower, a husband and father, and hopefully a lifelong learner. I think 25 years ago I thought I had things figured out. 25 minutes ago I remind myself that I don't, from that perspective. So yeah, that's kind of who I am in a nutshell on a quick bio.
I appreciate that. And I love your message. When we're in our 20s and 30s, we know it all, and then when we hit a certain level, 25 or 30 years later, we recognize we knew nothing, and really still we're even eager to accept the fact now we don't know it. We don't know anything, and we want to know more.
Well, that's 100%. It was funny because we were having this conversation every morning here at the office. We have a meeting of our department, and we were sitting here. We're actually, ironically, we were kind of talking about more biblical stuff than work stuff. But I was like, you know what? The further I get down this road, the more I realize I don't know, and the more I'm eager to try and absorb and learn. And it's like the more I learn, the less I know. And I think a lot of that is in what we do in life as well, and in our business. I think we grow more when we realize what we don't know. And I think for any young leaders or professionals out there, or anyone who might be listening to this, I think the key takeaway or anything that I could provide from a value perspective is when you realize you don't know, and you start to seek. That's really when you start to grow, whether it's spiritually, professionally, coaching. When I left college as a player, I thought, man, I got this game figured out. Maybe my skill level is not great. I'm not going to get paid to play, but I really understand and know everything there is to know about this game. And then I started coaching, and I had to communicate to players that maybe weren't at the same experience level I was. And then I realized how much I didn't know because I couldn't communicate it. And when you can communicate and articulate things to people that have no point of reference, and you can do it well, then I think then I think your content. I think you are wise in your content, and I'm still working on that.
As we all are or should be in that regard, because you really hit to the heart of something that later in my life, later in my career, that have really stood out to me, and that's this whole thing about self-awareness. We can't become what we were intent or made to become, can't serve our purpose until we're truly honest with ourselves in regards to being self-aware. And sometimes that's so difficult. I know in my younger days, ego, selfishness, or whatever it might be, it was so difficult for me. And I looked in the mirror one time and said, yeah, that's who I am. But later on through experiences and maturation, I've recognized self-awareness is an everyday and an
Right.
every moment thing.
100%, 100% right. It's funny you mentioned that, because prior to this, us coming on here, I was having a kind of a conflict or with one of, I'll say, our athletic director and superintendent about some decisions that they had made that really I didn't really agree with, but I wasn't totally on the front aware of kind of where they were coming from, and I had to sit back and go, okay, wait a minute, it's what's my role? There's a reason that they're making these decisions, and you really have to be self-aware of how you're reacting and responding to things when I look at it and go, okay, that's not how I would want it to be done, but it doesn't really matter how I want it to be done. There's a reason behind it, and I have to sit back and say, okay, what's my role? Get your ego and pride and try and I'm a control freak, out of the way, and just and probably just 10 years ago, I would have probably reacted irrationally and emotionally, and probably had a lot of it apologizing to do after the fact, once things were explained a little differently and I didn't just take it at face value. So part of maturing is being able to say, wait a minute, let's don't react the way you want to. Let's take a deep breath. Let's consider all angles of this, and then maybe ask for more information before you just react to situations. And so, I'm 52. I've been doing this a long time, but I still have to kind of talk myself off of ledges sometimes, because the pride and arrogance and the ego, and the know-it-all kind of wants to jump out first, instead of kind of sitting back and kind of evaluating the circumstances for what they are, and then make decisions at that point.
Coach, what I just heard you say in a nutshell, I think, is to be self-aware. You break it down by understanding yourself, and you understand self by seeing self and hearing the words that you're using and saying. Are you
Right.
listening first, speaking second aspect, and then really are you modeling and kind of seeing the actions that you want, that really align you want to use in order to model the purpose that you're focused on.
Correct. And I think sometimes we lose fact of we we have this desired outcome or this desired person, but we lose sight of the fact that we have to be really, really intentional with how we go about how we study, how we grow, how we act, how we talk, how we treat people. And by being intentional, we begin to be more of what we were supposed to be or designed to be, or what our purpose is because we're focused on the right things, and we get. I talk to our players all the time about being present and getting our breath and controlling our heart rate so that we can get to rational thought, so we can get emotion out of our responses. Not that we want to lack emotion, but we just don't want to respond with emotion. And so sometimes I have to start coaching myself. Daryl talks about sometimes preaching to himself. I have to talk to myself and say, okay, wait a minute, now breathe, get back to present, get your heart rate down, don't act with emotion. And so part of that is like that self-awareness is understanding where you are in that spectrum so that you don't do things that you're going to regret out of emotion.
And we should clarify, Daryl's Daryl Land. He's the
Oh, sorry.
minister of the Redemption Christian Church in Jasper, Indiana, where Coach Mattingly works and lives nearby and coaches nearby in that aspect. So just for clarity, we're located and coming to you from Southern Indiana, beautiful Southern Indiana. And it's supposed to be preseason baseball, but the weather's a little colder today because we've actually had some nice warm spring days leading up to it, and it just feels warmer as we record this episode. Coach, you mentioned being intentional. That's an area that a lot of people struggle in, and maybe I want to say a lot of people to make me feel better. But when I look back at times when I wasn't successful, either for growth or I got in the way of my team's success, it was because I wasn't intentional. Why is it so hard for some of us?
Because I think it requires discipline, and we live in a society, especially culturally now, where, my opinion, we lack a lot of discipline. And because everything's coming at us, I call it like the Atari. Well, let me say the PlayStation syndrome. Almost dated myself there, right?
Yeah, Atari, nobody would know probably
Nobody
but you and
nobody
I.
will know what that is. But it's easy to hit reset. So if I don't like it, I can hit reset and start over. And if I don't like this, I can go, everything. If I don't like the way this app's looking, I can jump to everything's like the speed of information now is so great that we're distracted. So it's keeping our attentions hard. And so we become distracted and less focused. And so it's harder to be disciplined when we're distracted and less focused. So then, therefore, it's harder to be intentional when we don't have the or discipline to be intentional. When we're going, I call it this. This is not a professional term, but I call it like being a fart in a skillet, where you're just everywhere all the time and you're never going anywhere. You can spend all day working and get nothing done. Is because you lack the intentionality and the focus of moving the needle forward, whether it's career, coaching, spiritual, your relationships with people. It's just hard to do because we're so distracted.
Thank you for that, Coach. And to your point, and whether we're see ourselves as an individual in a moment or we see ourselves as a leader in a moment, intentionality and consistency and discipline is so important to our success. When you think back, and you mentioned the Gene Mattingly of 25 years ago versus the Gene Mattingly that we see, and those of us who are blessed to cross your path once a week or more often, to have to call you friend and brother in Christ. Talk about your trek to leadership. Did you 25 years ago look out and say, Gene Mattingly, you're going to make an outstanding leader? Just go do it today.
No, absolutely not. I think it's something that I think I'll say it this way. I think we become leaders when we first become carers. And I think early on, I probably cared more about my own success and my own, ascension to some imaginary success or top that I was on this road to. But I think once we become, it's more important about who we're dealing with or who we're coaching or who we're sitting across the desk from as an advisor. When we start caring more about the other person, then our leadership really starts to shine. Otherwise, I think you're just managing, and I think you're just pulling people along. But I think when you begin to really care about where that other person's going and how you can help them improve whatever area it is, that's when, and you're intentional about it, that's when people become leaders. And I don't think I think people say, well, he's a born leader. I think he's a born carer. I think his heart and emotions in the right place, but he cares more about the other person as much as he does himself. And I could not say that 20 years ago. I was a manager and I was trying to get people to get to a point where ultimately it helped me, right? So if I'm managing people, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be perceived as a better manager if the people below me are doing well. Well, think about it in the terms that really began to change when I began to put the people that I was managing first. And so that's really when it began to change for me, when I really got myself out of the equation and put the others in front.
And when we look at it as managers, that's when we make decisions such as, or at least my experience, we make decisions. Well, I'm just going to go do that myself. I don't have time to train someone else or to trust them to do it right, because at least I'll know it get done right,
Right.
which
Mhm.
really
Or my way.
wasn't
Yeah.
correct. It got done the way I would have done it. It doesn't mean it was the best right to ever have.
Yeah, and it doesn't empower anyone. And I think the best thing about leaders is when we have the capacity where we empower others to succeed. Used to, and I think part of it's a perception, and maybe part of it or more of it's ego or arrogance, where you're scared to give some of the credit away because then it may not look you may not look as well
Mm,
in the situation, right? It's like, what are people going to think about me if I'm giving all the credit to someone else? There's this whole there's this fear of recognition. I think a lot of times that we have as managers, where leaders I don't think care really about the recognition. They really deflect it, and they really want it to be on the people that they've empowered, so that they continue to grow, and mature and whatever it is they're doing. And I think we around here at German American, we talk about leading versus managing, and we don't want managers, we want leaders, because managers aren't really empowering anybody. They're just telling, and we want to inspire and lead, for people to reach their potential, not necessarily ours.
yeah, I appreciate that. I am one who believes the elimination of the word manager or managers is long past due.
Right.
Everything should be leaders and leadership in that regard.
That's exactly right. And I think the connotation is just different. And I think how we treat, and ultimately, I think how we treat people and where we put ourselves in that equation, ultimately is the really the differentiator, if you will, on whether we're managing or leading. A lot of the same skill sets are there. It's just, how are they implemented?
Yeah, exactly. So, Coach, who's someone in your life or your past that has really played a part in your transformation from manager to leader?
Oh, geez. Besides Christ, a human, realistically, I had a really, really good coach in college, and I didn't realize how good of coach he was, until, geez, later. I was probably in my late 30s before I really appreciated just how much of a leader he was. Um, he was a way better person and leader than he was, a coach, in my opinion, from a baseball perspective. But man, he just inspired me to do what's right, and not what's right for me always, but it just to make sure people. He always did. He always put others first, and I probably didn't appreciate that like I did, until later in life. And he's probably one that's probably later in life, I've looked back and been way more inspired by him, than what I was when I was playing for him.
Thank you for that, Coach. And I've referenced you as coach many times, and when I think back of Coach John Wooden, and I think back, hey, I was a non-talent, so I was one of those individuals that hung around and as a manager watched to make sure the balls were ready and all that stuff.
Mm.
But there was an individual, a coach that was a math teacher as well, that I just called him coach and just gained so much respect for. And as I reflect back, I really think the word, the recognition of leader has grown from what was termed as coach constantly
Mm.
back in the day. There's just so much of coach and coaching and that connotation built into true leadership.
Right. I agree. There's a lot there's so many parallels, to that's interesting you point that out, because I don't know, from my perspective. I used to think differently, but I always wanted to be president or vice president or senior vice president. You're right. It wanted some kind of title. But I look back now, I mean, outside of Christ follower, husband, father, I put coach as the next in line, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, it's more of that mentor leader type of title, that where you have the capacity to have a positive impact in someone else's life, not just worrying about how it's impacting your own. And that goes across the board, regardless of what discipline you're in.
Well said. Well said. Coach, you mentioned the term empowerment, and when
Mhm.
I hear the term empowerment, I think transformation. And when I think transformation, I think maybe on a little more more of what I would term more of a short-sighted view is this term called change that tends to send humans from a natural aspect, into anxiety at times.
Fear
And
and anxiety, right?
yeah, but when we think about empowering and coaching and leading and trusting others and empowering them, people like yourself are truly creating a transformation opportunity for them.
Absolutely. And I think ultimately we have to get to a point where um, we've got to stop being so fearful of failure. And I think part of that, change is one thing that causes fear, but failure probably causes way more anxiety.
Mm.
And I think it keeps us from growing more than anything else because, I was reading some of the questions, ahead of time, just trying to get a feel for kind of what we'd be talking about today. And when I read one of them, I'm like, failure. I mean, how many times have we heard, we learn more from our failures than our successes and stuff like that. And it's like, there's so much truth to that. But we've got to be willing to transform ourselves by trying and getting out of that comfort zone. And then you can't learn from failure if you don't ever put yourself in a position to fail. So then you're just kind of stuck where you are. And and so I think transformation versus just merely change is a process that you get out of your comfort zone, you may fail, you make the adjustment, you try again, you may succeed, you may fail again, and then you adjust, you change, you tweak, but you keep moving forward down whatever this path is that you're striving, that you're intentional to get on. And
There's
I
that
think,
word again.
yeah, it's the same word because too often, people think of change, and if it doesn't happen, success doesn't come right away, then they want to change again. Or the failure keeps them from, they'll just go back into whatever they were comfortable with, and they don't grow. And I think as leaders, we do that. We try to empower somebody, and we try to get them to give them some authority, if you will, and then as soon as they fail, we go, oh well, we misevaluated that person's skill set, or maybe our skill set we didn't see, instead of saying, what do we learn from this, and how do we help them to not fail next time. And I think the reason why I love baseball so much is because we fail we succeed 3 out of 10 times. So we fail 7 times, but we're constantly learning. We're constantly trying to succeed in a sport that is built on failure.
I love that.
So I'll get long-winded if you get me going here too long, but yeah,
you're
but to your
good.
point, I think change is more of a turn. We turn the light switch on and off, and we get an immediate result, right? We don't transform. We transform over time through trial and error, success and failure, and modification of our processes. That sort of thing. We don't just, what's the definition of stupidity or idiocy, or if doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? We change and evolve our processes to give ourselves a chance to be successful the next time. And I think that is transformation, in my opinion, versus just a change.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Coach. And we're talking to Coach Gene Mattingly. Coach serves full-time as a financial advisor for Southern Indiana bank called German American Bank. He's located in Jasper, Indiana. He's coached high school baseball and played at the college level. And we're talking leadership and learning more about Coach Gene Mattingly. Coach, I appreciate you being here for us and sharing from your heart and your soul and your experiences, and hope you can stick around to join us on another episode of Leadership Synergized.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Kevin. Love chatting with you.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for joining us on Leadership Synergized. And remember, it's about serving, transforming, inspiring, influencing, loving through faith, family relationships, and leading in, through, and beyond our strength zone. Look for another episode with Coach Gene Mattingly coming up.